Hey everybody, Hoosier Jedi here with another review for you. This time talking episode 15 of season 2 of The Flash called Trajectory. And this was a reasonably solid episode of the series. I certainly enjoyed it. It just didn't feel like a super strong standout. But there were definitely a lot of nice elements in here. Let's just kind of get some of the stuff out, main big stuff out of the way. So the character of Trajectory is from the comics. She was somebody who was given powers as part of Lex Luthor's Everyman project. Um, this isn't somebody from the comics that I am really familiar with, so no real comment there. And even here on the show, the character really didn't have a whole lot of depth to her. I'm just sort of this Velocity 9 drug addict thing. uh, I wasn't really terribly wowed by Velocity as a character. In fact, the only thing about her that really jumped out at me is if you stopped and looked at her costume carefully, you could see that they had definitely taken more than a few nods from Johnny Quick, the evil speedster from Earth 3 and member of the crime syndicate. So if you're going to introduce an evil speedster onto the show, then that was kind of a nice way of going about it. And it was certainly fun to see Cisco geek out about, oh, we get a female speedster. And then Jesse gets injected with some Velocity 9 this episode, possibly setting up a way as to how they might introduce her getting her own speed powers down the road. And okay, cool. And I definitely did like the way that Velocity ended up. I'm sorry, Trajectory ended up dying. Again, just sort of hurt so fast that she just faded away into dust. I mean, that's very classic in keeping with Flash mythology. And just leaving the costume behind. I mean, that's how Barry died in Crisis on Infinite Earths. So, yeah, very cool there. Um, but let's go on here. One of the big things this episode was the idea that they talk, particularly in Iris, is where it was really clear, where they talk about heroes and how sometimes our heroes turn out to not be the people that we think they are. Jesse in a lot of ways idolized her dad, and then she finds out that he had killed someone. Central City has to stop and question whether or not their hero, the Flash, has gone bad. Everybody who's basically kind of sees Jay as a type of saint, or at least a real hero who died at the hands of a real fallen hero in the terms of dead, not evil turned to the dark side. Um, Here they find out like, oh my god, Jay was evil all along. It's just like, no, damn it, again, someone we considered a friend and a mentor turned out to be an evil speedster. Man, I really hope we don't go back to this well a third time in season 3. But I gotta give the writers a little bit more faith in that, especially given that we don't still know fully what's going on with Zoom. But the idea of, oh, he's dying and he wants Barry Speed because he thinks that could be a cure. Okay, now now that is interesting. And now that we have this whole thing with Jay, we can stop and think like, well, if we completely throw everything Jay said from out the windows from the moment he showed up, what does that mean now? It's like, well, that's a lot of very intriguing possibilities. Now, we still, of course, don't know the full story of what's going on with Zoom, and I have a feeling there's going to be more than a few twists before we get to the end of that road. But yeah, that was cool stuff. And it was, again, a nice chance to sort of remind us, like, hey, Cisco has powers. Let's see here. Nothing particularly huge to say about Caitlin this episode. I definitely did like that whole dynamic with Jesse and Harry. Harry, he's made it very clear, like, I will do anything to protect Jesse. And Jesse's like, look, you went too far, and also you're still treating me like, I'm a kid. I'm a grown woman. There has to be a limit to what you, as your father, you as my father, you have to have limits on. You have to have some limits. And I definitely like the idea where she just says like, "Look, I gotta go," and then she hops on a bus going to Opal City. And again, Opal City, as I said in my other reviews where this sort of stuff is referenced, home of Starman, one of my absolute favorite comic book series of all time. I, when I was reading that book, I mean, that book was coming out like when I was in high school, And like that Generation X from Marvel and Image's Gen 13, those were like my three big comic books that defined me back in the 90s. Yes, I'm that old. And yeah, so just so those little nods that we've seen to Starman, like somebody in the writers' room on these shows is a big Starman fan, and it delights me beyond words. Um, so also, speaking of Jessie, her watch going off when she goes to shake hands with Wally. Hmm. Now we know that there have been other people who gain metahuman powers who were not in Central City on the night of the particle accelerator explosion. And again, Wally turning up on the doorstep at Christmas time. If you know your Flash history, yeah. Okay, let's just leave it at that. Um, the whole training thing. I'm really sure if drones are going to be able to support a grown man's weight, but okay, I'll let them happen. That happen. It's sort of like, okay, if Barry can do that whole, no wait, no, Barry can't really exactly do that tornado thing with his arms, can he? No, I guess my brain was not in the right place, but yeah, um, sort of making these big superhuman super speed leaps doesn't really feel like the hugest challenge for the Flash. Also, that bit at the end where Velocity destroys a bridge for I don't know the lulls of it all. It's very nice of her to stand there and wait for Barry to take a crack at jumping across that huge gap in the bridge, rather than getting the hell out of there. Also, it was very fortunate for Barry that someone happened to have a camera that could take a picture of two people with super speed extremely clearly and was apparently mounted at ground level in such a way as to frame them clearly. So I guess there must have been like a professional photographer with an extremely nice camera on that bridge at the time who stopped to snap that picture, because there's no other damn way they're going to get anything that clear under those circumstances. So, yeah, let's see. What else do we have to talk about this episode? So the whole thing with Iris and the editor, not bad. I'm not really wild about this new guy, but he's being set up as not an unreasonable person. I mean, that story he tells, like, hey man, everybody thought this guy was an enormous, unquestionable hero. I got the truth, and it turned out he was a dirtbag. Well, you can cite any number of examples of that from real life where somebody who everybody thought was a saint turned out to be a complete and utter bastard. So, I see where this guy's coming from. But Iris nicely also has a point that, like, look, yeah, sometimes people aren't who they say they are, but that there are people out in the world who are what they claim to be. There are people out in the world who are genuinely heroes. So, both of them are right. The whole romantic tension thing, okay, sure. But this seems a little bit weird coming on where after Iris was sort of talking about like, wow, we seem to have a lot of situations, future alternate reality, where we're married. And to me, I kind of read that her was kind of like, maybe that wouldn't be so bad. So yeah, I don't know. It kind of feels like if this relationship with this guy goes anywhere, it's going to be like, okay, Iris, are you doing this because you're really into this guy, or are you just sort of trying to duck what may or may not be fate? Uh, let's see. Anything else that I wanted to talk about this episode? No, nothing really is jumping to mind. I mean, it was a fun episode. They did a nice one-shot character as the villain that worked out pretty well, and you never know. I mean, it's a comic book show. If they have the right story, they might bring Trajectory back at some point, which would certainly be cool. It would definitely be very cool to have an evil female speedster for Team Flash to fight. And you know, I kind of hate if shows really, really, absolutely have to have the female characters fight other female characters, but having a little arch enemy for Jesse Quick of her own. That would be kind of cool. But again, that would be something that'd have to be do down the road. But if they decide to go that route, well, then it's like, okay, we just find some way to bring back Trajectory. And of course, if Trajectory's injecting Jesse with that stuff played a role in Jesse getting her powers, well, that's a little too juicy to resist, eh? And yeah, I really do think that covers everything I had to say about this episode. So I'm going to call it here, guys. As always, please comment, rate, and subscribe. And of course, you can follow me on Twitter at Hoosier Jedi, and also join me on Tumblr at Jedi Reviewer. Until next time, take care and have a good one.